Welcome back to U.S. history. Yesterday we were finishing up with the anti-communism in America. We mentioned the New Red Scare. We mentioned Alger Hiss, the spy who only got imprisoned for perjury. Nixon, whose career broke off thanks to this moment. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the spy couple who were executed for their actions. U.S. loyalty programs, the idea of making Americans in industry prove that they were loyal to America and not communists. And then we finished off with Joseph McCarthy. We mentioned that McCarthy was just like Nixon, he was an avid anti-socialist crusader. The difference was he never found a single communist in the government. He made all these speeches, he made all these scripts, he gave all these ideas about how he knew who all the communists were, and yet he never found a single one. Yet that did not seem to slow him down from continuing to accuse people left and right. Finally, in 1954, he was censured for his conduct. McCarthyism came to describe him, and if you need a definition of McCarthyism, it's like this: his alleged use of lies, distortion, and innuendo to fight against communism. After his censure, he lost all respect and political power. To be censured by Congress, it doesn't mean you're kicked out or anything, but basically he was rebuked publicly for his actions. He lost all respect, public power, and was never an influence in politics again. His demise also brought about the end of radical anti-communism. Letter B, Eisenhower and dynamic conservatism. What was the name of Truman's domestic policy? The Fair Deal. Dynamic conservatism was the name of Eisenhower's plan. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about the election of 1952. 1952, Truman decided not to run again. He could have, but he decided with the Korean War going on and unpopularity that, he got, quote unquote, lucky the first time in 48. He didn't think he was going to win again. He was done, and so he refuses to run. In 1952, we've got Republicans, Dwight D. Eisenhower running for president with his vice president, who we've just mentioned, the now popular Richard Nixon. He had been commander of the Allied forces in World War II and commander of NATO. In fact, both parties asked Eisenhower to run for them. He decided to run as a Republican. His vice president was the up-and-coming young political star Richard Nixon. One thing that Nixon faced while he was running as the VP in the 1952 election campaign, the New York Post published an article accusing Richard Nixon of keeping a secret illegal fund supplied by millionaires to stay in style far beyond his salary. The report was inaccurate, the fund was not illegal or even secret, and it was for campaign expenses. Nixon realized that a simple denial would not do, however, so instead he gave a speech on national television. He described the special fund and its use, and to illustrate his honesty, he read a detailed statement of his finances. Among other things, he stated that his wife did not have a fur coat, only a respectable Republican cloth coat. Because Nixon said that the only campaign gift he would keep was his Cocker Spaniel dog named Checkers, historians have often called this the Checkers speech. Nixon's speech succeeded in winning over most of the American public. The Democrat candidate was a man by the name of Adlai Stevenson. Stevenson was governor of Illinois, proudly intelligent, but was no match for the popularity and charm of Eisenhower. Stevenson would lose to Eisenhower in 1952 and in a rematch election in 1956. Eisenhower will become the first Republican president since Herbert Hoover back in 1928. So Eisenhower wins. The program, by the way, in your notes, I'd put this parallel to elections, so I'd write it right there. Dynamic conservatism. Eisenhower claimed to be conservative when it comes to money and liberal when it comes to human beings. The idea is, you know what, we need to be careful with our spending, but we got to help people too. So what was dynamic conservatism look like? Number one, he sought to cut the federal budget, and he did reduce some programs. In 1954, his new budget cut expenditures by nearly 10%. He abolished the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, a holdover from the Depression, and reduced farm price subsidies. Number two, he sought to emphasize business. Eisenhower had several millionaire businessmen in his cabinet. Because several cabinet members were from the auto industry, Adlai Stevenson joked that the New Dealers had been replaced by the car dealers. That's kind of humorous, I admit. Number three, he expanded the size of the government in many ways, however. Much to the displeasure of many conservatives, he did not abolish the New Deal programs. In fact, in some cases, he expanded them. Letter A. For example, he broadened Social Security. This would cover professionals, domestics, farm workers, armed service personnel, and other groups that had been previously excluded. Letter B. He increased the minimum wage to $1 an hour. Oh, we imagine, getting that kind of salary today, that would be unlivable. Previously, it had been 75 cents, so jumped up a whole quarter. Letter C, he created a new cabinet position, the Health and Human Services. Letter D, he poured funds into education. And letter E, he helped establish the interstate highway system. This system committed the national government to pay for 90% of the interstate highways in the U.S. These freeways have become known as the main arteries of highway transportation in the U.S. And of course, with that thought in mind, how many of you guys have used the interstate lately? Well, probably all of us. So we can thank President Eisenhower for getting it all going. After 8 relatively peaceful years in office, Eisenhower retired. Big letter C, Kennedy and the New Frontier. Remember, Truman's domestic policy was called the Fair Deal. Eisenhower's domestic policy was called the Dynamic Conservatism. And now we have Kennedy and his program called the New Frontier. The Final Frontier? No, the New Frontier. We have the election of 1960 taking place. Republican candidate was Richard Nixon. As vice president, he, of course, thought it was his turn to be president of the U.S. And then the Democrat candidate was John F. Kennedy. Both had been World War II veterans, and both had served in government. Interesting thing about this election was included the first televised presidential debate. For the first time ever, the candidates competed on television for all Americans to see. During the 4 debates, the younger, poised, and charismatic Kennedy bested Nixon, at least in image. Most who watched the debates thought Kennedy had won. Those who listened on the radio thought Nixon had won. It's kind of interesting how television can shape the mindset of the viewers as easily as that. The election itself proved to be an extremely close case. On page 542, it shows you a map of the presidential election of 1960. You can see the electoral votes, yes, but if you look at the popular votes, you notice that they were within about 100,000 votes. Really close, considering the fact that there were tens of millions of people who voted. It to be down to just 100,000 people makes it a really close election. End result, though, JFK won. Television won out. Kennedy will become the youngest president ever elected at age 43. He'll also be the first Catholic to serve as president. The youthful JFK, with his young and beautiful wife Jacqueline, seemed to embody a dramatic change in government. As Kennedy said in his inaugural address, "Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike. The torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Probably the most well-known quote from Kennedy's inaugural address is this phrase. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So let's talk about what Kennedy's presidency will actually do. New Frontier, by the way, I would just make sure you can associate that quote with JFK. In your notes, I would put that parallel to this, the next thing that we're going to talk about. The New Frontier. Number one, it appealed to American idealism. One of his most popular and successful programs was the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps was a government project designed to send skilled volunteers overseas to help underdeveloped nations. In reality, Kennedy's administration differed from previous ones more in style than in substance. Another thing that he created was the Alliance for Progress. The Alliance for Progress, U.S. granted economic aid to Latin American countries. That's what you need to know about it. Some countries saw improvements, others saw failure. Number two, the New Frontier also increased government spending to stimulate the economy. Congress expanded public works, appropriated almost $5 billion for housing, gave financial aid to distressed areas, increased Social Security benefits, and raised the minimum wage again. Number three, supported tax credits to businesses and tax cuts for individuals. This conservative effort did help to end the recession America was dealing with, yet liberals condemned the act as acting Republican and a bit too moderate for their tastes. And then number four, and sorry that the Peace Corps picture is blocking the view, but, and also the humorous picture I like on there. The thing you need to write down is number four, he expanded the space program. Kennedy challenged the space program to put a man on the moon before the end of the 1960s. While Kennedy won't live to see that day, his vision did come to pass. That's all the material that we're going to cover for today. Be good, do good. Bye. Oh, wait, before you go, don't forget that you guys have a quiz that you need to take. It's over pages 537 to 543. So please don't forget about taking that quiz. Again, now, hope you all have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good. Bye.